a turning point. There can come a turning point. Everybody has their own pivot point, their own turning point, but there can come a turning point where maybe we are feeling burdened and crushed down with the sense of our guilt, and we suddenly lose our certainties about everything. We're not so sure about our own, even who we are, or maybe the righteousness of our actions, or maybe a string of actions of our life. We're not so sure now about how good we seem to be crushed and overcome with guilt. And it can be a turning point. It can be a turning point when we say, I don't seem to know much about anything about this world anymore. I don't know much about this life. I may not even know much about me. But I still am able to hold on to one precious truth. I can trust in God. And so that turning point where we lose our certainty, it's not when we know something, it's not when we know what's going on, it's when we don't know what's going on, when we're not sure what's going on. But then we can receive the grace, one of the great graces of the Feast of the Ascension. We can receive the grace of assurance. It's not a knowledge that I know what's going on. It's a heart knowledge. It doesn't come from thinking about theological things. It comes from the experiences in our lives where we reached a turning point and we weren't very sure about a lot of life, but we still had one precious truth that we could hang on to in the face of everything. I can trust God. God is trustworthy. I can put my trust in God no matter what happens, no matter what comes, no matter what has come before. I can put my trust in God. That is the grace, one of the great graces of this Feast of the Ascension. And we call it assurance. It's not a certainty. It's when we don't have certainty, but we have a deep, deep assurance that is a gift from God, that I can put my trust in God no matter what. No matter what. And so mothers are the great ministers of assurance, this incredible grace of God that is about God, but it's also wired into the human heart. Mothers are the great ministers of this. Fathers do it as well, but I think mothers probably are the first ministers of assurance. They pour so much assurance into their children's hearts, time after time, year after year. And maybe when they're still adults and we go home to our mothers, and somehow when we were children, our mothers would say, it's okay. It's going to be all right. Things are going to be okay. And they didn't just say it to shut us up, although that might be part of it. But they also said it because there's a deep knowledge in the human heart that is in touch with God at all, that everything really is going to be okay. That deep down, the world really does make sense. There really are some answers. We're not going to get all, but we will at least get some answers in this life. And deep down, everything is going to be okay. And our mothers give us that sense of assurance that is exactly the same sort of assurance that God gave to Jesus. Jesus received the same assurance as he faced being God allowing him to be tortured and crucified and murdered without God rescuing him. But he was assured, deeply assured with that deep, deep, deep knowledge that comes from an experience with God and the experience with life. In the end, it's going to be okay. I can trust in God. I can put my trust in God. And we need that assurance all the way through lives. I mean, I'm sure some of us go back to our mothers, even though we're not children anymore. Maybe we go back to our mothers as adults and we start to whine about all the things about the world, and our mothers still are ministering assurance to us and saying, it's all right. It's going to be okay. Are you trusting in God? It's going to be all right. Isn't that what our mothers have been doing for us for our whole lives? Because they are in touch with that deep, deep truth. That deep, deep truth that is the grace of the Ascension. Maybe we're wondering if, one of the things that's difficult to being an adult, maybe this is what our mothers have helped us with so much. What does it mean to be an adult? Sometimes this is what it means. It means that there is a burden in life, and I know it's got my name on it. And so I pick it up and I look at it and I'm looking for somebody else's name, and it doesn't have anybody else's name on it. It's got my name on it, and I know I'm going to have to shoulder that burden and I'm going to have to carry it. And nobody else can do it but me. And then that's when we need the grace of this feast. We need the grace of assurance. Not certainty. It's when we're not certain. It's when we don't know how we're going to do it. It's when we don't know how this fits into the world. We don't know how it makes sense. But then the gift of God's assurance is, you can trust in me. Pick up that burden. You can carry it. And everything will be okay. You can trust in me. And isn't that the grace of this feast? Because Jesus is Lord. This is a feast about Jesus being the Lord of the universe. This is a feast about the cosmic Christ, who is in the center of all things and who rules and reigns from there, and who rules and reigns in our hearts. And this ruling and reigning of God and the deep assurance that he gives to us, it's not as simple as a, frothy little, I won't have any trouble in life because I trust in God. That's totally false. There is a false religion. There's a wonderful saying, and I don't remember who said it, that false religion says, if I trust in God, nothing I'm afraid of will happen to me. That's absolutely false religion. It shouldn't take us too long to figure that out. That didn't happen to Jesus. True religion says, if I trust in God, some of the things I'm afraid of may happen to me, but they will not be something to be afraid of if I trust in God. That's true religion. And so I love the story about the man who he had a bad leg, and he would limp to, people would see him limp to church every day, and he would after church, he would kneel down and he would pray, and he was doing so much praying. And people ask him, they say, tell us how you do a lot of prayer. You seem to be a big prayer. Tell us how you pray. And he said, this is how I pray. God, leg. That should have got a way bigger laugh. That's a funny story. Man, this is a tough audience. Is this on? God, leg. Sometimes that's the only way we can pray. Sometimes we pray for healing. Sometimes it's the right thing to do to pray for healing. Sometimes it seems like the right thing to do to shoulder our burden and to carry it. And sometimes it's the right thing to do to just limp and hobble into the presence of God and to receive the company of God and just be in the presence of God and to just put our trust in God. And so this feast of the Ascension is the feast of the Lordship of Jesus Christ, of the cosmic Christ, seated at the center of all things, ruling and reigning in our hearts and in all of the world. And it's not as simple It's real easy for us to come up to invent a kind of God who will protect us from everything and make life be lovely. That's a false God. And life is really good at convincing us when we have started to worship an idol, and pretty soon the world doesn't work that way. And then the world teaches us a lesson. And then we don't, because normally we live a life thinking, well, I know quite a bit about the world, but I don't know very much about God. And then we start to worship a false God. And then we're not sure whether we know very much about the world at all or about ourselves. And then we fall back to the thing of, but I know one thing for sure. I know one precious truth for sure. I can put my trust in God, not in my understanding of God, not my idol that I've created about God. I can put my trust in God. And that is the grace of the feast of the Ascension of Jesus Christ. Jesus is Lord, ruling and reigning in our hearts and in this world, in the midst of the concentration camp. Jesus is Lord in the midst of the battlefield. Jesus is Lord in the midst of the families that are being torn apart by division and dissension. Jesus is Lord no matter what happens. And Jesus is Lord, ruling and reigning as the cosmic Christ over all things, and especially when all of the evidence is to the contrary. That's when we receive the grace of this feast of the Ascension of Jesus Christ, the incredible grace that is the gift of a deep knowledge of faith that God gives to our hearts that we call assurance. Yes, I don't understand it. I don't understand it, but I know one deep truth. I will put my faith in God. That's what the Ascension is about. It's about the lordship of Jesus Christ over all things. And so this is a wonderful feast, and we all need to receive that grace. When we are not sure whether life makes sense, when maybe we're not even sure that we knew who we were, because our life has been, we've been the guinea pig in the experiment of our life, and we've been trying to live out a certain way to be a person, and then there could come times when we begin to doubt, am I the right person? I've been trying to please everybody my whole life, and now I don't even know if I can please me. And we lose the certainty. That's when we need assurance, the deep, deep, deep faith that I can doubt everything else. I can have all the doubts in the world about the world and me, but I know one precious truth that I will hang on to no matter what. I can put my trust in God. That's what this feast is about.